What if the most profound transformations arise from the depths of our darkest moments? How does one navigate the treacherous path of trauma to ultimately harness its power for success? Join me as I explore the transformative journey through adversity, discovering how embracing and overcoming trauma can become the pivotal point that propels you towards unimaginable heights of achievement.
Welcome to Biz Help for You with host Candy Messer. Entrepreneurs like to focus on the big picture, like profitability, success, and a smooth running organization. But there always seems to be those little things like taxes, employee compensation, laws, regulations, and more. Now you can get the answers you need in one place. Join us today as we break it all down for you. Now, here's your host, Candy Messer.
Hello and welcome to Biz Help for You with Candy Messer. Thank you for joining me today. If you missed my last episode and would like to listen to the show, links can be found on my social media pages as well as multiple favorite podcast platforms. And if you'd like to receive notifications on when my podcasts have been uploaded, please like and subscribe. Now, let's learn a little bit about my guest today. Susan Gold is magical, navigating a ferociously challenging upbringing while bravely moving forward as an adult to face ingrained, outdated, and patriarchal programming head on. Susan now shares a unique perspective in viewing life challenges as occasions for transformation. She's excited to help others all over the globe transform their traumatic experiences into peace. Through her book, Toxic Family: Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom, Susan turns the standard paradigm on its head, courageously leading others through her own journey of abuse, addiction, and surviving narcissism, all while creating a distinctly empowering personal and professional life. So, Susan, welcome to the show.
Candy, that was a mouthful.
But it is good to give a little bit of your background so people know where you're coming from and why are you an expert in this area. So I do want you to share maybe a little bit more about your story and what made you decide to write your book.
So I started in a really tiny town in central Pennsylvania, the middle child of 5 with 2 parents at the helm doing the best they could, but it was more like hurt and damaged children, raising hurt and damaged children. And I had a bee in my bonnet to get to New York City. I used to watch Barbara Walters on my beanbag chair in the basement and just hope and pray I could extricate myself one day and live in New York City and be like Barbara Walters. And ultimately, I did get there. I worked at a large global talent agency out of college, and Barbara Walters became my personal exercise client. So that was
Nice.
quite fortuitous. And I became known for matching celebrities to brands, and it was quite glittery work. And I think one of the reasons I was so good at it was I had learned the survival technique in my home. I am a super empath, and I could intuit the emotional feelings, the emotions of the other individuals around me. And it was a handy tool. And I had honed it to precise skill set. And I used that in my business. I did a lot of convincing talent to do things they might not ordinarily otherwise do. And I think that was just based on the sensitivity and the ability that I had garnered, just naturally being a super empath, but also being so highly attuned and intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you asked about the book, Candy, and I don't want to negate the question. So the book has come much later. I did a lot of marching through a lot of difficulty. The red flags came up early in my adulthood, and I was replicating past traumas that I had experienced as a child and had witnessed. But luckily, I was able to see them clearly and had the courage to address them. And I was told in 2007 by an Irish seer I had a book to write, and I promptly kicked that notion straight under the closest carpet because I really didn't want to go through that experience for what I perceived to be a PR tool. And
Mm.
then in 2019, I had two intuitives back to back tell me, you have a book to write. And the third intuitive said, you have 3 books to write. And I thought, oh boy, before this turns into some kind of library, I better address this issue. And that's how I began writing the book that recently published.
Mhm. Well, I think too, when you have gone through something that's extremely painful, it's hard sometimes to put that in writing and to share that with the world and be vulnerable. But at the same time, if you're realizing like this can help other people, I think a lot of times that can help you make it through that whole process, to really share your message.
I feel like we're at a precipice. We're at a delightful precipice and a release from some old paradigms that are certainly getting rusty and perhaps transparent. And though Toxic Family was not my choice of title for my book, that was my publisher's suggestion, and rightfully so. My title and feeling was Magical Illumination, transforming childhood trauma into adult freedom, because that's what it's been for this trajectory, this life walk that I've had. That's how I see it, and I see the players in it. And I do feel like, yes, I had an incredibly successful career in a glittery, glamorous division of the entertainment industry. And yes, I was gratefully blessed with an opportunity to engage with household names and people that others admire. But ultimately, I believe my purpose and my mission in this lifetime is to address this taboo topic of toxicity in our family lines, in our bloodlines, in our ancestry, that we've left unspoken. And not an easy topic, but a transformational one, and a topic that needs to be addressed to live fully.
Mhm. Well, I think too is people are, usually listening to my show when we have business topics, they may be wondering like, well, why is she having an episode on trauma? So I'd love for you to talk about how trauma actually affects us as business owners as well. And, why that we do need to have this conversation.
I'm going to give you a very specific example. I was in my late 20s and I was playing the role of a broker. So I was in the middle of 2 parties, trying to bring these parties together for a very large corporate event with multiple contracts for major talent acts. And this business role replicated the role clearly that I had played in childhood. And I will be graphic. I was 7 and I was awoken from a deep sleep by my parents arguing outside my bedroom door. My mother was pleading for her life. I jumped out of bed, opened the door to find my father in what I perceived to be a drunken stupor, with his arms above his head and a metal object in his hands, and my mother sobbing on her knees. And I yelled, "Stop," and promptly fainted.
Hmm.
And this trauma was still obviously in my body at that point, and replicated in post-traumatic stress in this business deal. And ultimately, I fell into a suicidal and clinical depression. And I had to address these memories and the cause of this clinical depression to move forward as a business owner and to act from a current day place rather than replicating this past trauma. And I think it's pervasive. I mean, I think a lot of us, especially as entrepreneurs, feel like we can just suit up and show up and mush through it. And ultimately, I don't believe that's true if we would like to be our healthiest, best, and most fulfilling self, not just as business owners, but as individual human beings.
Mhm. It's true. And I would say, like, from my perspective, I didn't really have trauma like this in my life growing up. So I don't necessarily understand the triggers per se of what could happen in that situation. But I understand that sometimes you could, try to bury it. So like, oh, I'm just going to deal with it and I'm fine. Right. But like you're saying, there could be something that comes up in business, then that all of a sudden will trigger that again. And so it's important to, work through this whole thing so that you can have a successful business.
Yeah, and you can lead coming from your heart rather than some false facade
Mhm.
that you perceive to be necessary. And I think that is an old paradigm that we're beginning to wake up to as we see the systems that we've utilized for so long crumbling around
Mhm.
us and becoming dysfunctional. And we're starting to take a look and saying, hey, yeah, maybe we need to dust this off and see it from new perspective.
So, from some of the information you had provided to us at the time we were, bringing your information in for the podcast prep, I noticed you have a statement that says the answer is yes until it is no. So, why is that a motto for you?
Candy, I love that you asked that question, and I love that little motto as you've described it. So, my former father-in-law taught me that in my early 30s, and it was just genius. And I think that it's a proper caveat because so often we don't even realize it, and we put up blocks when an opportunity is presented
Mm.
and go into that place of self sabotage, and we may not even realize it. I mean, I
Mhm.
can't tell you how many people I've counseled to say the answer is yes until it's no. Explore the opportunity. You don't know.
Mhm.
And people have taken 3 steps away, and I've shoved them 5 steps forward and continued on. And some of those jobs that they've stepped into as a result of a holding yes until the answer is no, or the deals that they've made and the clients they've secured, it's really been phenomenal. And it seems magical, but it's quite simple. The answer is yes until it is no.
Mhm. And do you feel it's like fear? Is fear of success, fear of, going through some other, traumas maybe that, are going to come up because of this? Like, what is it that people then really just immediately start with the no instead of being open to that yes?
Yeah, it's old belief systems, it's false constructs. Yes, perhaps it's past trauma, perhaps it's current trauma, perhaps it's the human condition. But I know for a fact and through experience that it does come up, and it comes up often when the opportunity one has been waiting for is presented. And it's almost like shock and disbelief. No, I don't deserve this, or
Mm.
whatever the scenario is. And then it ends up crumbling because there's so much objection or sabotage that takes place. I've had to say it multiple times because I've reinvented myself over and over and over again. And that's why I've always used that since I heard it. The answer is yes
Mhm.
until it's no.
So, do you want to share maybe how you were able to kind of overcome these challenges to then make an impact on your professional life that you are able to have the success that you're having now, albeit where you came from and the issues that you had growing up?
I had to become aware. That was the first step. A lot of us go through our lives with blinders on. We never really take the time or have the opportunity to watch them drop or even to explore what's
Mm.
within. It's almost like, you're taught to sit in a position and behave a certain way and don't color outside of the box. And it's amazing that, we're instructed this way early, but we hold on to that deep into adulthood, and some never have the opportunity to examine. It's almost like they're
Mhm.
frozen in place, clawing their way to the next safe rung on the ladder or crevice in the cliff. Yeah. So I've been fortunate to whether I've garnered the awareness in a natural way or that awareness was thrust upon me. to actually step in and engage in that awareness, accept it, that it is part of my humanity and it is part of my walk on this planet of exploration and part of my soul's journey for evolution. So acceptance, to be aware of that opportunity and then to take action. Oftentimes it involved getting help, seeking it from an outside source, whether it's a professional or a trusted associate or a friend.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so important, though, to have a support system. And like I said, I haven't gone through major trauma, but just in life, we all have circumstances anyway that we really need someone, to lean upon. And so when you have somebody, whether it's, like you said, a close friend or a professional that you can really open and share and like get rid of all the stuff that you're stuffing, down inside, I think that release is definitely healthy too, not only mentally but physically, because we can just become ill just from all of the things that we keep inside as well too. So I don't know if you have any tips for somebody who's listening who maybe is thinking, I do know that I am holding on to things that maybe I need to release and I'm not sure how to go about doing that, so what would you tell someone who's thinking like, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying and now I need to know the next step?
Well, as you're saying it, I'm hearing the bar rise. If it's me and I'm in that circumstance, I'm already saying, "Oh, I'm not enough." And the central nervous system is starting to heat up and I'm starting to feel that gerbil getting anxious on that wheel and
Hmm.
run. So my suggestion is probably not typical, but it's either to take the right or left hand, place it on your solar plexus, which is at the top of your rib cage below your breastbone, and just take a breath in and take time for it. And either silently to yourself or out loud, if you have the privacy, just say to yourself, "I'm okay." And just that simple exercise grounds me right back into my body, into my essence of who I am. I'm no longer this automaton racing through the hour or the day or
Hmm.
to the next, goal. And I come back into the moment. And believe it or not, that's where authentic home is. And from that platform, which is a safe, even, balanced platform, I can take the next right action. So that's
Hmm.
my simple suggestion and tip.
Okay, perfect. Well, I also think, a lot of times we are, and this happens a lot with social media too. I think you see successes that people are posting, and we start judging ourselves against all of these things around us and saying, well, we're not good enough. But I think, at least from my perspective too, I always find inspirational stories where someone has overcome something really impactful. And I enjoy seeing like that transformation of somebody who was in one place and they made it through these challenges and come out on the other end and they have this success. So, what would you say to someone then too about how they can view these challenges in our lives as opportunities to bring about that transformation?
I see this earthly walk as a schoolroom. It's all for our learning. If I really get Southern California hooey on you, Candy, and I know you know what that means, having lived in California like you did, I could say that I set this all up before I came in, that I was perfectly positioned in that middle of 5 kids in that family in central Pennsylvania, that it was perfect that I left my home at 17, living in Greenwich Village at 19 on my own, knocking on the factory door to convince Andy Warhol to do a commercial that he didn't want when I had 2.5 months of money in the bank and I didn't know if this deal was going to happen or I was going to be able to keep my business afloat.
Hmm.
It's all for purpose. And if you just hold on and look for the miracle, which does come, it will be well worth it. And you do see how your challenges and your challengers actually serve you.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. I mean, I've known people who have said, yes, like I've gone through these horrible things, but they ended up making me the person that I am today. And I'm thankful for where I am now and who I am. And even though I went through this horrible time, I wouldn't change it because then it would change me. So, like, what would you say about that perspective that often people will say?
Yeah, I think if we're privy and we're proud and brave enough to step up to the plate and see these things as opportunities, we are going to feel the miracle and the personal power and ability that is showered upon
Mhm.
you as you walk through it. I mean, I was fired twice in the workplace. And both times, the employer thought I was too powerful. I didn't know
Mm.
what they were talking about. I had no, what do you mean? Like, I just told the truth and stepped into it. And I could have sat and sobbed that I was the one kicked off the island. I could have sued in one case if I really wanted to hold on to the anger. Even my personal exercise client, Barbara Walters, was willing to step up and confront this gentleman with me that had fired me. But ultimately, would that serve my purpose to hold
Mm.
on to that injustice and the rage? No, what served me was to drop it in both circumstances and move forward and come from a place of love. God
Mhm.
forbid I would not be wanting to be living in the earth suit of some of these employers. Thank God I'm not in the construct of some of my best challengers. And
Mhm.
that's why I see them not as challengers, but as amazing gurus, amazing teachers. And that's a totally different way to perceive the moss under the rock.
Mm.
But I believe that's why I'm here.
Mhm. Nice. Well, I know also one of the phrases that was shared with us was standing up when you want to sit down. So, do you want to discuss that in a little bit more detail as well?
There's so many times that I would have rather crawled under a rock or hid in my closet, literally, because the fear was so great and the unknown. How was I going to walk through this? How was I going to put the deal together to make the payoff that I needed? And I, for a long time, was the sole breadwinner in
Mm.
my family in Southern California. It's a lot of pressure out there.
Yes.
But I would choose to stand up over and over again and trust that there was higher purpose. And I also feel I had a team rooting for me that helped me put the pieces together. And every time something would fly in from left field, completely unexpected, and it would magically come together and always better than I could have even imagined. But I had to stand up and I had to suit up. And I have to say, by doing that repeatedly, I'm living heaven on earth today. It's not that I don't have my fears. It's not that I don't have my foibles and make my mistakes, but I have such a solid platform, a track record that I can look back on and I can share
Mhm.
that with other people, share that experience and help them stand up and suit up and walk through it. And that's worth what I've gone through.
Mhm. And I think too, whether it's on the personal, you're dealing with this and overcoming these challenges or business, you're going to have those successes, but you're also going to have some things where oops, I took a couple steps forward and then now I have a step back, right? Nothing is always completely straightforward, at least from my experience and people that I know, there's going to be some setbacks. And so I think just being encouraged to know that it's okay. Like if something didn't go the way you thought, it's okay. Just pick up from where you are and continue the journey. So, what are maybe some final tips maybe that you might be able to share kind of along those lines of don't be afraid to continue making progress, even if it's not what you think it should be, or maybe you're not where you think you should be by now, but continuing that process.
I think kindness is the word that comes to mind. It's not something that's been, touted, and certainly not in my education, my upbringing, certainly not even in the corporate system when I was engaging in the corporate system, which was not very often in my career because I just stood out like a sore thumb. But treating myself with kindness and treating others with kindness and really understanding this is not an easy place. We could be, who knows, in the straight up ghetto of the solar system. So you're doing amazing, is what I would say. Encourage yourself. You wouldn't say the things you're saying to yourself to a 3-year-old child. Really, gingerly handle yourself with kindness and then radiate that to others. We're all doing the best we can.
Right. From what you just said too, I'm hearing like one of the things you need to do is really think of yourself in a high enough, like respectful way that you are not cutting yourself down. Like if you're not going to talk to someone that way, don't talk to yourself that way, right? To really give yourself the grace, to understand you've been somewhere that's difficult and you are making the attempt to change and to be kind to yourself as you go through that process.
Yeah, and I believe that's one of the constructs we've been channeled into. We've been herded into this judgment, this expectation. I mean, my goodness, my son is getting through college in 3 years instead of 4. Thank goodness. But the pressure of doing that. And then his roommate is a double major and a double minor. It seems like the bar is so high. Oh, let's look at that. Yeah, let's look at that.
And again, I think everything that I'm hearing from today's topic is really forgiving others, forgiving yourself, giving yourself grace, being kind to yourself, realizing, you may have had a plan of where you want to be and maybe you haven't made it there yet, but it's okay, right? You're making progress, and just to like love yourself for where you are and who you are and kind of keep stepping into what is to come.
And what's authentic to you. And I think it helps you take more chances and take more risks and go after some of the things that you've been dreaming about secretly on the side.
Nice. Well, I know we're coming close to the end of time that we have together today. So I want to ask, how can our listeners contact you if they want to learn more about you?
Well, Candy, first, thanks for having me. Thanks for producing the content that you do. Thanks for bringing these great conversations forward. I just heard your episode with an incredible book marketer that was really educational and informative. So thank you for what you're bringing forth. And if people feel moved, they can reach me at susangold.us.
Oh, nice. Very easy to remember. Perfect. So thank you, Susan, so much for being a guest on my show and talking about this topic. I know dealing with trauma and discussing it maybe isn't the easiest, but by sharing your story, you're helping others who are hearing this and maybe they haven't really moved forward yet on their own, and you're giving them that courage to do so. So I really appreciate the discussion today.
Thank you, Candy.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. I hope you found this topic interesting and enjoyed the informative discussion. Would you please share my show with those you know and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform? I'd really appreciate your support. If you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to my guest at any of the links that they shared, or you could send me a message at media@abandp.com. I hope you can join me for my next interview. And remember, you can connect with me on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And my website is abandp.com. This episode is sponsored by Affordable Bookkeeping and Payroll Services. If you are overwhelmed trying to handle the financial aspects of your business, AB&P is here to help. Contact us today to discuss your needs at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.